Welcome back to Crit and Crit. I'm Axion,
I'm Scint.
and we are continuing our discussion of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and our playthrough of Castlevania, Circle of the Moon.
Belmonts are a kind of messed up family, aren't they?
Well, number one, I'm not playing a Belmont today. But yeah, they are in the sense that they're, generationally expected to be heroes. And if you've watched the Netflix show, they're, super not well respected for it, despite the fact that they go out of their way to risk their lives on behalf of people. But that's a whole rabbit hole on its own.
Indeed. And admittedly, I'm not super up on Castlevania lore. Literally all I know is the Belmonts kill Dracula. Repeatedly. But, yeah. So, there is sometimes, an unfair family burden placed on you, just based on who you are. It could be, you need to take over this family business that you have no interest or talent in, or I want you to do better than I did, so I'm going to ride you really hard about your grades and who you're hanging out with and everything like that, even though maybe you're happy with not getting, a medical license to become a doctor or something like that. So there's a lot of, just expectation, and it can lead to some resentment. Whether that's the child having expectations from the parent, or, the child having expectations for their parent that maybe neither party is willing or able to meet in some way. And I think Frankenstein looks at this in a pretty thorough examination. Beyond just the obvious victor and creature relationship, there's a whole bunch of parenting to look at.
So, where would you like to start with regards to this discussion?
Let's start with a more benign example I have, which is Henry. So, Henry was not initially sure he'd be able to attend university because his father had very specific ideas for him taking over the family business. So Victor got to do whatever he wanted, but Henry's family was not quite as, well off as Victor's, and therefore there were certain expectations that had to be met.
And this was not abnormal in that day and age to have an expectation that the child, especially the firstborn child, was destined to take over the family business or the family responsibilities, and
So, quote Victor. The day of my departure at length arrived. I had taken leave of all of my friends excepting Clerval, who had spent the last evening with us. He bitterly lamented that he was unable to accompany me, but his father could not be persuaded to part with him, intending that he should become a partner with him in business in compliance with his favorite theory that learning was superfluous in the commerce of ordinary life. Henry had a refined mind, he had no desire to be idle, and was well pleased to become his father's partner, but he believed that a man might be a very good trader and yet possess a cultivated understanding. So, Henry and his father have a good relationship, but Henry wants to be a better educated merchant and not just do the business and don't read any of these fancy books. So when he is able to go, it's just rather surprising to him. You may easily believe, said he, how great was the difficulty to persuade my father that it was not absolutely necessary for a merchant not to understand anything except bookkeeping, and, indeed, I believe I left him incredulous to the last, for his constant answer to my unwearied entreaties was the same as the Dutch schoolmaster and the vicar of Wakefield. I have 10,000 florins a year without Greek, I eat heartily without Greek. But his affection for me at length overcame his dislike of learning, and he has permitted me to undertake a voyage of discovery to the land of knowledge. So, And this is why I consider Mr. Clerval, who we never actually see, to be probably the most benign example of parenting in the story. Because while he and Henry have disagreements, as you know are common, it's like you're not a monolith as a family. You're not going to agree 100% on everything all the time. But he and his son have the type of relationship where they can talk to each other about their disagreements and eventually come to, okay, I want what's best for you, and if you really think this is best for you, I'm not going to fight you on it, make me proud. And, you know, had Henry not been friends with Victor and gotten killed as a result of it, he probably would have.
Yep.
So, yeah. It probably is meant to come across as cruel because, you know, Victor is narrating this, and he clearly has opinions on, I wish Henry could come to school with me, that Mr. Clerval would say no, but, well, speaking from my modern American perspective, college is really expensive, so if his father was like, I don't think we can afford to send you off, I can totally see that, but I don't think it was quite the same back then, though given that university was mostly meant for wealthy families, it probably still was to some extent, but not to the same level as today, if I'm not getting too rambling there.
But it was also a different expectation of what it meant to be educated in that level than what it is today, because we kind of live in a society where that kind of education is to some degree expected. There's a lot of jobs that you just can't do unless you have a college degree, or in many cases you could do it without one, but people won't hire you, which that's a different problem, but...
Yeah. So the next parenting that kind of comes to mind would be the obvious ones of the Frankensteins. Like, not Victor, but Monsieur and Madame Frankenstein.
Pay better attention to your son.
Well, not just that, but maybe tell your son no once in a while.
Oh, and don't tell
No,
him that your newly adopted daughter is a present for him. Because, that one caused some issues.
Yeah. No youth could have passed more happily than mine. My parents were indulgent and my companions amiable. Our studies were never forced, and by some means we always had an end placed in view, which excited us to ardor in the prosecution of them. So, yeah. His parents basically gave him whatever he whenever he wanted it, and I don't think Victor actually understands that people can tell him, no, you can't have everything. His behavior certainly indicates otherwise. But Elizabeth, and to some extent Ernest, turned out okay. William, I don't know, because he was pretty young, and therefore, I mean, like, I still think William was kind of a brat, but he didn't deserve to get killed over it.
Yeah, he's a kid. That's basically what it comes down to. He was being a kid, and sometimes kids are little shits.
Yep. But yeah, his parents meant well. Like, they wanted their children to be happy, and they did everything they could to make their lives comfortable and easy. Unfortunately, since they weren't paying 100% attention to what Victor was doing, and they didn't alter their plans at all when he was, you know, supposed to be going off to school, even though he had just lost his mother, which was basically the first time he'd ever felt loss and despair in his existence. So, probably would have been smarter to, you know, make him wait a year to go off to school. Get some
therapy? Or whatever
I don't think therapy existed at the time.
I was about to say whatever the temporal equivalent is.
But, you know, like, maybe talk to him. But, yeah. So we've already kind of hit the two extremes here in terms of I will not give my children everything they want, but we still get along, all the way to I want my children to be happy at all costs, and I will never ever deprive them of anything that they might want. And how well that turned out. There's also Mr. DeLacy, but we don't really get a whole lot of him as a parent. We kind of see more the reverse of how his children are caring for him because he is elderly and blind and therefore cannot take care of himself.
Right.
So, in that respect, we can also see that children are, you know, expected to take care of the parents, and there is expectation on both sides of the equation. So it's not at all unseemly that, adult children should care for their infirm father. It's just the natural way of things, and even to this day, yeah, you don't want to just ditch grandma in a nursing home and forgotten. You want to make sure she's taken care of.
Well,
you love her.
Most of the time you don't.
In generally speaking, we're kind of assuming families get along. For the sake of, convention.
Yeah, that's fair. Buzz off.
Yeah, if you want to talk about bad families, we can go ahead and talk about Victor and the Creature.
I mean, that
or,
was...
Justine and her mother.
I mean, we don't get a lot of information on Justine's family beyond that her mother was abusing her. And that it had something to do with the death of her father. But beyond that, there's not a whole lot that's said.
Yep, I was just going to read that quote.
Go ahead, then.
Do you not remember Justine Moritz? Perhaps you probably do not. I will relate her history, therefore, in a few words. Madame Moritz, her mother, was a widow with 4 children, of whom Justine was the third. The girl had always been the favorite of her father, but through a strange perversity, her mother could not endure her, and after the death of Monsieur Moritz, treated her very ill. My aunt observed this, and when Justine was 12 years of age, prevailed on her mother to allow her to live at our house. So yeah, we don't have a whole lot of detail. But yeah, just to note that, yeah, Victor's not the only bad parent in the group. But let's go ahead and get to that.
I mean, that is the primary reason we're having this conversation.
Yeah, but in the sake of thoroughness, explore other options.
Yep, no, absolutely.
So yeah, Victor, at the age of 17, decides he's ready to take on this situation, which comes to fruition at the age of 19. So he immediately regrets this and promptly abandons the newborn. The fact that the newborn is 7 feet tall does color the situation somewhat strangely, but for all intents and purposes, Victor has essentially given birth and then immediately dropped the child in the dumpster. He thinks no more of the creature until he absolutely has to. He tells no one because he doesn't want to deal with the judgment and responsibility thereof, and therefore his monster, his child, his son, whatever you want to call him, is left to wander alone to figure out everything. And, I mean everything, as in how to separate the perception of sight and sound, to perceive heat, to everything. To learn that he's not going to be tolerated by people, so he has to hide himself for his own protection. So, his creation, therefore, his entire existence knows nothing but struggle, suffering, pain, and rejection. Yet Victor sees himself as the victim in this situation when he is asked to, take responsibility for his creation. Even something so small as, will you please make a friend for me and then I'll leave everyone alone. You'll never see me again. Victor can't even do that.
Oh!
We made friends.
Big friends.
So, yes, well, it is not forgivable that the creation decides the best way to get his feelings out is a murder spree. It's hard to fully fault him because you can absolutely see that he had no other options for anything. It doesn't justify things, but it does explain them. And it by no means gives Victor any room to stand on, because the entire situation could have been avoided had he simply done the bare minimum for his child. Had he been there for his creation, the creation would not have been wandering around and found William alone. Had the creature not found William alone and accidentally killed him, well, strangled him, I don't know if it's accidental or not at this point. It's hard, you can read it either way based on what he says. Justine would not have been framed for his murder. Had Justine not died, Elizabeth would have been in a much better mental state. had Victor not run off to go make up for abandoning the creation, and then reneged on his promise, Henry would not have died, Elizabeth would not have died, and his father would not have died of grief. All of these lives could have been saved had Victor taken one iota of responsibility for his actions. But to some extent, he has to know he's in the wrong because he refuses to explain anything to anyone. So, what do parents and children really owe each other? Is kind of the question this has been building to. Obviously, they owe not murder, but that's so below the bare minimum that I don't even know why I'm saying it, other than it's Frankenstein and apparently we have to.
I was about to say, to be thorough.
Yeah. Not complete abandonment, neglect, and abuse. Again, you'd think this would go without saying, but... Hi, Victor. How you doing? So, if we've hit the bottom of the barrel in talking about how Victor and the creation interact with each other, there's also the expectation of, like, while you want their lives to be, you know, comfortable, don't make it so overly so that they don't know how to cope with anything, like Mr. and Madame Frankenstein ended up doing with Victor. Victor was so sheltered and so spoiled that he has no concept of hardship until his mother dies. Like, I can't imagine getting to the age of 17 and still not knowing what sadness really is. I had a decent childhood, but I still went through some struggles and was told no on occasion. And you have to be able to do that as a parent. Discipline is an important thing, and discipline is not the same thing as punishment. Discipline is setting clear boundaries with consistent expectations thereof.
Yep.
So, yeah, I'm still going to stand by my statement that Clairville's father is the best parent in the story. We never see him, but all we see is he tells his kid no for what he thinks is the right reason, and when he decides, okay, maybe not, he and his son talk, and he changes his mind.
Yep. We don't see him, but we see the results of his actions and the result of the way he raised his child, and that has an important effect. We don't need to see him personally when we can see how his actions shaped Clairville and use that as a judgment of his character. Ah. Didn't mean to quite jump that high.
Yeah, and there are all sorts of reasons that we could look at for why the other family relationships turned out as badly as they did in the long term. But we can probably look at that, like, just as individual characters. Like, it's beating it into the ground at this point that Victor is the father of the year, you know? But yeah, I'm not really sure what else to add here.
Well, then I just need to kill this dragon. Ow. There we go. I had forgotten that this was the boss here. Awesome! I can push boxes now. This is going to open so much more of the castle.
Woohoo!
And we will continue our discussion of Castlevania, or our discussion of Frankenstein, and our exploration of Castlevania next time. Bye.